You're listening to the weekly Parsha Podcast with Ari Goldwag, recorded with Hashem's never-ending assistance in Orma B'Shemesh Israel, 5783, 2022. This week's Parsha is Parshas Breishis. We begin the Torah from the beginning. Breishis in the beginning. Kadosh Baruch Hu created the world. I'd like to share with you a piece in the Medrash, which at first glance seems to not be so connected to Breishis. Doesn't seem to be connected to the story or to the fact that Hashem created the world. However, as we'll see together, there's a very deep and profound connection of this Medrash, indeed, to the concept of Breishis. And we're going to speak about the concept of from beginning to end. Amar Reb Simon, Mishum Reb Yeshua ben Levi. Reb Simon tells us something in the name of Reb Yeshua ben Levi, a very interesting idea, a fascinating idea, and a fascinating story coupled with this idea. MaNTsPaCh. We find the concept of MaNTsPaCh. There are 5 letters in the Hebrew alphabet which are written differently depending on the location of that letter in the word. These 5 letters are Mem, Nun, Tzadi, Pei, Chaf, MaNTsPaCh. And the Mem has a Mem and a Mem Sofis, a last Mem if it's written at the end, so on and so forth through all of them. Now, what is the concept? So we've spoken about this concept before as the concept of Mashiach. These are the letters that are doubled, and there's Pakaditi, the letter Pei, which has a Pei in the middle and a Pei in the end, represents the statement of Moshe Rabbeinu. Moses, when he came to redeem the Jewish people, he said a double Pei, Pakaditi. He said 2 words that start with that letter. Each of these letters has a different indication of some concept related to redemption. Beginning and end, in the middle and the end. A concept related to the end means we are moving into a new reality. That's what redemption means, moving from being slaves in Egypt to being the chosen nation of Hashem, receiving the Torah, being a light unto the nations, etc. But our Medrash here talks about this in a different context, and it's very much related, and it's very much important, to understand. And this concept is as follows. Rabbi Yirmiyah b'Shem Reb Chia bar Abba Omar. So, first of all, before I get to Rabbi Yirmiyah, first of all, we have Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. He says that the Tzayfim Amru, the MaNTsPaCh, these 5 letters were said by Tzayfim. Tzayfim means seers, those who see, which is a very interesting idea. Who are the Tzayfim? Who are those who see? The Pashtus, the simple explanation is it was said by the prophets, those who can see the future, those who in the beginning are able to see the end. Halach l'Moshe Sinai, but it seems to say 2 opposite things. It says it's Halach l'Moshe Sinai. It was given over to Moses on Mount Sinai. So which way is it? Is it the prophet said it? Is it something that our later sages instituted? Is it something that we received from Moshe on our Sinai? What is the idea here? And the answer, as the Gemara says, it's a Gemara in Megillah, the Gemara says that they're all true. That it was originally given over to Moshe Rabbeinu. It was something that was forgotten. And this is an important point. Let's focus in on this point because it's very important to understanding what does it mean the beginning and the end. It was something that was given over to Moshe Rabbeinu at Mount Sinai. It was forgotten, and then it was restored by the prophets. It was restored by the later sages. This idea of a letter in the middle, a letter at the end. What is the idea? What is the concept of it being forgotten, being restored? What does this teach us? Rabbi Yirmiyah b'Shem Rabbi Chia bar Abba Omar, Ma shehiskinu hatzayfim. He says that which the tzayfim, the prophets, were mitaken, that they established. So he seems to be saying that it's not something that was there before, it was something that was reestablished or established later. Let's try to understand this. Medrash gives us a story. Now listen to this story because this is such an interesting story and it's so essential to understand the concept. Ma'asev hoya b'yom sagrir. There was a story that happened on a particularly dark day. It was a day of rain. It was too hard to get. It was very difficult to get to the study hall. The sages did not get to the Beis Medrash. They weren't able to reach the place where they studied Torah. There were children there, young children. The children had come to learn. They wanted to study the Holy Torah of Hashem. but there were no teachers to teach them. So they said, Boy v'naseh beis havad. Let's make our own group. Let's make our own group to study. Let's make our study group together. Amru matam. So this was a unique day. The kids got to school, but the teachers didn't. And the kids said, let's learn stuff. Let's try to understand the Torah ourselves. Matam tam ksiv mem mem. Nun nun, tzadi tzadi, pei pei, kaf kaf. What is the understanding of why we have these double letters? The mem and the mem sofis. The nun and the nun sofis. Why do we have these two different versions of each of these 5 letters? Elami ma amar le ma amar. So the children said an amazing pshat. They said an idea, an incredible idea. They said the two mems indicate ma'amar and ma'amar. Each of these words start with the letter mem, which is also needing explanation. Whenever we have a concept like this, we're going to say that each of these letters of MaNTsPaCh are really a hint to a larger word. We need to understand what does that mean, also in the context of beginning to end. They said ma'amar le'ma'amar, one word to another. Minemon le'nemon, from one trusted one to another trusted one. Mitzadik le'tzadik, from one righteous one to another righteous one. Umipeh le'peh, the letter peh represents the word peh, which means mouth, from one mouth to another mouth. Mikaf le'kaf, the letter kaf represents the word kaf, which means a palm. From one palm to another, from one hand to another. What does this mean? So these children explained as follows. Mimamar le'mamar, mimamar shal kodesh baruch hu le'mamar shal Moshe. The word of Hashem, the statement, from one statement to another statement, means that there was a statement that was made by God, as it were, and it was given over to Moshe to state. Minemon le'nemon, the Torah, we're speaking about the Masorah of the Torah. Interesting, right? We're talking about halacha l'Moshe Sinai here. We're talking about a concept which is was given over to Moshe, was forgotten, and we're talking about it being remembered, recalled, reinstituted. We're talking about it, though, in the initial point, these children are saying a pshat in MaNTsPaCh, and they're saying, it's so deep, so beautiful. They're saying there was a giving over from Hashem to his trusted servant, Moshe Rabbeinu. Because Baruch Hu shenikra Keil Melech Naman, we refer to God as the God who is the king who is trusted. Moshe Rabbeinu is referred to as the trustworthy one. As Hashem says, as the verse tells us in Numbers chapter 12 verse 7, in all of my house, he is trustworthy. Mitzadik l'tzadik, the letter tzadi represents the righteous one, giving over the Torah to the righteous one, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, shenikra tzadik, tzadik Hashem l'chol derachav. God is referred to as the righteous one. As the verse says, we say it every day in Ashrei. God is righteous in all of his ways. L'Moshe shenikra tzadik. It was given over to Moses, who is referred to as a tzaddik, as a righteous one. Dichsiv tzidkas Hashem osav, pasuk in Dvorim, Lamed Gimel, pasuk Chaf Aleph. The righteousness of Hashem he did. Mipeh lepeh. The pasuk refers to these children refer to the letter pei as being a reference of one mouth to another. Mipiv shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu lepiv shel Moshe. Right? Moshe Rabbeinu received from Hashem's mouth, as it were, and he spoke out with his mouth. Mikaf lekaf, from one palm to another, from one hand to another. Mikaf yodeh shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu lekaf yodeh shel Moshe. From the hand of Hashem into the hand of Moshe Rabbeinu to Moses. So an amazing thing happened. What happened? When the rabbis finally arrived, the sages, the teachers finally arrived into the Beis Medrash, where these kids had sat around, probably I imagine, in the same positions as the great rabbis who taught them. They would sit around and they would have conversations about Torah. So these children also emulated their teachers, and they came up with this beautiful pshat in the letters, mem, mem, nun, nun. They came up with this beautiful pshat, and the sages came into the Beis Medrash. They found the kids sitting around and studying and explaining these letters, and they said, "Wow, there's something special about these children. So they wrote down the names of these children. And these very children, these very children were the ones who came out eventually as incredible, great scholars. These kids who sat down by themselves when the Rebbes weren't present, and they studied and they came up with a new pshat, a new idea in the letters of the Torah. Who were these sages? V'yeshamim Rebbe Lazar, Rebbe Yeshua, Rebbe Kiva. Now listen to this, because this is incredible. Who were these sages later on? They became great sages. These were the children. They became the great sages, Rebbe Eliezer, Rebbe Yeshua, and Rebbe Kiva. Rebbe Akiva, the Heilige Rebbe Akiva, Rebbe Eliezer, Rebbe Yeshua, the great sages of the Mishnah. A child is there's something hidden inside of this child which eventually bears fruit. And the Medrash ends off with 3 words which are difficult to understand. The whole entire Medrash, as we'll soon see, is very difficult to understand, as the Meforshim point out. But the last 3 words are also an enigma. Perhaps we can understand. Mitzvah Hashem will have an explanation. But Anochi de Reb Meir v'chule. It ends up by saying Anochi of Reb Meir. Anochi, famous word, first word of the Aseres Hadibros, the Reb Meir, of Rabbi Meir. Who's this Reb Meir? What's it referring to? What's this Anochi? First word of the Aseres Hadibros. What does it have to do with our conversation here? Okay, so there's a problem with this Medrash. This problem, you might have already thought of the problem. But the problem is that the Medrash says that there were 3 children here. 3 of these children became incredibly great sages of the people of Israel. Who were they? Rebbe Eliezer, Rebbe Yeshua, and Rebbe Akiva. So Rebbe Akiva is the most obvious problem, because Rebbe Akiva, it says that he didn't learn any Torah until he was 40 years old. Rebbe Akiva was an Am Haaretz. He was an ignoramus. He only started to learn when he was 40 years old. So how could it be that as a child, the Medrash is telling us that he said this chiddush, he understood this amazing pshat. Furthermore, Rebbe Eliezer, who's one of these 3, he was 28 years old when he started learning the Torah. Before that, he was a businessman. His father didn't let him learn Torah. His father forced him to be involved in the business. Only when he was 28 did he start to learn. He became one of the greatest sages of the entire Talmud. He became the great Rebbe Eliezer HaGadol. So, what does the Medrash mean? How can the Medrash say that these 3 children were the great sages who would come later? They only became great later in their lives. They didn't have a foundation in Torah learning. What is the understanding of this? So there's an incredible secret that's hidden inside of this Medrash. What is this, like we said at the beginning, what does this have to do with Breishis? What does this have to do with the Torah? Okay, we could say, in a very simple understanding, we could say that the Medrash is laying down a foundation. The Torah was given to Moshe Rabbeinu. Every single word we have in the Torah is Emes Lamita, it's the deepest depths of truth. We need to know that before we start the Torah. We need to know at the beginning of the Torah that this is something that was given over from Hashem's mouth to Moshe Rabbeinu's mouth, from the ultimate trustworthy one, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God Himself, who created the world, to the ultimate trustworthy human being. We know we can trust this. The children understood that. So it's a foundational idea that we need to have before we start learning the Torah. But I would like to suggest something even deeper than that. Really something incredible. So gishmak, such an awesome shot. And it seemed to me to be, I think, the Parsha shot. And what this Medrash is saying. In order to understand, I'd like to share with you what the Marzu says in answering this question of who is Rebbe Eliezer and Rebbe Yeshua, Rebbe Akiva? Who are these people? They as children, they learned this, but we know that they didn't. Rebbe Yeshua did. Rebbe Yeshua learned all of his life. He was a great sage. But Rebbe Eliezer started at the age of 28. Rebbe Akiva, we know, started at the age of 40. What does the Medrash mean? So he says an incredible thing. He says that the truth is that Rebbe Akiva and Rebbe Eliezer, it's true that they started at the age of 28 and 40, but they didn't really. They actually started at a very young age. They started as children. They were sent to Cheder. They studied the Torah. And they had an opportunity in this story to make to bring into the world an incredible chiddush, an incredible idea. They ended up, as their childhood progressed, they didn't continue learning. They didn't continue in the Cheder. They didn't continue studying. Rabbi Yeshua did. Rebbe Eliezer and Rebbe Akiva didn't. It took Rebbe Akiva 40 years to come back to Torah. And it could be, as I was thinking about as I read this pshat in the Marzu, It could be that, we wonder like what inspired Rabbi Akiva to want to become a great Torah scholar. Like he saw drops of water dripping onto a rock and he said, the Torah can make a dent in my mind. Why would he think that thing? He hated Talmidei Chacham, he hated the Torah scholars. The answer is because he had learned as a child, perhaps we could say. He had learned as a child. So he tasted the sweetness of the Torah, but he had lost it. He had gone away from it. Only at the age of 40 did he have the insight to realize that he could come back to it. Rabbi Eliezer also, as the Marzu explains explicitly, Rabbi Eliezer, he wasn't allowed by his father to learn Torah. His father wanted him to be involved in the family business. His father cut him off when he sat down at the age of 28 to study. But as a child, he had tasted that sweetness of Torah. He knew that the Torah was the incredible gift of God to the Jewish people through Moshe Rabbeinu, through that Chol Beis Nemanu. But here's where it gets even deeper and more beautiful. Deeper and more beautiful. As I said at the beginning, the letters over here, you have the mem and the mem. The mem in the middle or the beginning, and the mem at the end. The nun in the middle, nun at the end, tzadi in the middle, tzadi at the end. What does that idea represent? So we mentioned that it has to do with the concept of Mashiach, of the Messiah's arrival, the redemption, moving into a new stage of reality, an end time. I think that what we see in this Medrash, hinted to in this story with the children, who ended up becoming incredibly great sages and Torah scholars. Rabbi Akiva was the Baal Mesorah. All of the Mesorah, all of the traditions that we have, the entire Torah, the revealed Torah and the secret hidden Torah, all of that was given over to Rabbi Akiva. All that we have today is from him. The Medrash is telling us something very, very deep, something very, very beautiful. You have a letter in the beginning or in the middle, and you have a letter at the end. You have a concept which was taught to Moshe Rabbeinu, to Moses, and it was forgotten. It was brought back by the tzofim, by the prophets. But one pshat here is very cool. It's really interesting. One of the pshatim in the Meforshim here is that the tzofim, who are the tzofim? Chazal say that after prophecy left the Jewish people, it was given over to children and to fools. There's a certain purity that a child learns with, that he can see something that we adults perhaps don't see. The beginning of a person's life, before they've become inundated with all of the messages of this world, all of the pull of this world, there's a purity there, which is represented by the first of these letters, MaNTsPaCh. But there's that purity can be lost, like as happened with Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva. They lost that purity. They went out into the world. They pursued material pursuits. But there's a mem sofis. There's a remembering that happens. The children saw it at the beginning, but they were able to come back to it at the end. There was a concept that was taught by Moshe Rabbeinu, but it was recalled by a later generation, by the prophets, or perhaps the children. There's a recollection. There's something which is imbued into us, which is there inside of us, which we were taught, perhaps in the deepest depths of our subconscious when we were inside of our mother's womb, by the Malach, by that angel that teaches us, and we are caused to forget as we come into the world. But it's there for us to uncover. It's there for us to realize. It's there for us to remember. And it's always possible for us to unearth that. It might be at the age of 28. It might be at the age of 40. It might be at the age of 80. But it's possible. It's possible to unearth. Now, what does that have to do with Breishis? So I want to share with you I don't want to read it inside because it would be too lengthy, but there's a medrash immediately before this MaNTsPaCh medrash, which speaks about the fact that the Torah begins with the letter Beis, Breishis, in the beginning. And the question is, why does it begin with the letter Beis? Beis is the second letter of the alphabet. Shouldn't the Torah begin with the letter Aleph? That's the real beginning. The letter Aleph is the first letter of the alphabet. The letter Aleph represents the spiritual one. The Aleph is the Alufah Shel Olam. God is the spiritual one who is referred to as the one, the first. Why do we start with the letter Beis, which refers to duality? Why do we talk about duality? Why don't we start with Aleph, which is the one, which is Hashem? Which is our Elokim bara Breishis. God created. Why does it say in the beginning God created? Why does it start with the letter Beis? And one of the explanations here is that the Aleph, the real creation, happens later. The Aleph waits for its moment, and its moment is Anochi Hashem Elokecha. Anochi Hashem Elokecha, when God speaks out the Ten Commandments to the Jewish people, the entire nation, 1.5 million people strong. Here's this incredible prophetic revelation. Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am Hashem your God, the Aleph. That's the real beginning. But that beginning was actually hidden way, way, way in the true beginning, in the Breishis bara Elokim. As it says here, the Beis, if you look at the letter Beis, so there's a little tail of the Beis. As the Meforshim explained, the little tail of that Beis points back. It points back to the Aleph. Which means that although it seems, as we look at the world, as we look at creation, we look at the physical realm, that there's just a physical realm. There's no deeper spiritual element to it. It's not something that's immediately apparent. But if you look more carefully, even the physical reality points to its origin, to its true origin, which is the Aleph, which comes before the Beis, and which is revealed at a later point in time, which is revealed 2,448 years later after creation, with the word Anochi. So I don't know the full explanation of the last 3 words of this medrash, but it says Anochi de Reb Meir. I don't know what the Reb Meir is, but what I do believe is the understanding of this medrash is, you want to understand what this medrash is saying, you want to know what the secret of this medrash is, it's found in Anochi. It's found in the word Anochi. Anochi means I. It means the first of the Ten Commandments. It's who created this world? Where does it start? Where does it get hidden? Where does it get forgotten? And where does that memory return? That memory returns through the children. And those children will also forget. May also forget, may not. May have a Rebbe Yeshua, a great Torah sage who throughout his entire life is dedicated and committed to learning and teaching Torah. But there's also going to be the Rebbe Eliezer, who doesn't learn till he's 28, and the Rebbe Akiva, who doesn't learn till he's 40, but had that foundation at the very beginning, and had that recognition of who gave the Torah. Hashem gave the Torah. He's a Ne'eman. The Torah is trustworthy. The Torah has a true foundation. Mipel, mikaf lekaf. Each of these letters represent something at the beginning and something at the end. They represent the fact that there will be a 2,000-year galus. The Jewish people will, for such a long time. Rabbi Akiva, imagine Rabbi Akiva for 40 years of his life. When he's a little child, he studied the Torah, but for 35 years of his life, however long it was, he was in galus. That's a long time. That's half of an average person's life. So 2,000 years, the Jewish people could forget who they are. They could be in exile and forget about Eretz Yisrael, not have the longing to return to Eretz Yisrael, the land of their foundation, where they relate to and connect to Hashem in the truest way. How could it be that so many people are far away for such a long time, and yet they return in the end? That's the secret of these letters, of the MaNTsPaCh letters. The secret is we are imbued, we are infused with the Aleph at the beginning, and the beginning of Breishis, from beginning to end. It's there, it's inside of us, it's dormant, but it's waiting for that spark to ignite and be returned to the Anochi, to the one who is the eye of all existence, to Hashem, the Aleph, the beginning, the first, the root, the seed. At the beginning of Breishis, we need to have this message. We need to know that the Torah was given 3,300 years ago, but it remains alive today. And there's a revival, a return to the Torah. There's a return to the place where the Torah is properly kept, Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel. That return is representative of, or is represented by Rebbe Eliezer and Rebbe Akiva, who forgot. They forgot their Torah. They forgot their connection, but they had it from the beginning. They knew the power and the truth and the ne'emonus, the incredible integrity of the Torah. And they were able to return to that integrity. They were able to return. They were able to find the letter at the beginning of their life and find that letter in the middle or end of that journey through this world, and return back to the source of the spirituality which imbues our lives with incredible meaning. I want to bless you. I ask you to bless me. Hashem should help us as we begin this new year. We should be able to return to the soul of who we are, to the Aleph. We should be able to recognize the Beis pointing back to that Aleph. We should be able to recognize within ourselves the moments of inspiration that we've had perhaps as children or throughout our lives, but find that new end and new beginning, just as Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva did. Become great leaders. Recognize the Anochi. Be zoiche, may Hashem help us to merit that we should experience the true MaNTsPaCh, the true revelation, the end, which is the beginning, with Mashiach, with the Messiah's arrival, speedily and in our days. Thank you so much for listening. Have a wonderful Shabbos.
This podcast was made possible through the gracious donations of listeners like you. For more podcasts like this, please visit www.arigoldwag.com or search on iTunes Ari Goldwag.